Welcome to Nice and Blunt. My name is Adam Riancho, and it's time for my quarterback rankings for 2024. I will be ranking every starting quarterback in the NFL, but for this video, it's going to be just part one, my top 16 at the position. I think these are all of the guys that you really need the most in order to compete this year in fantasy. So let's get it going. We are starting at number one with Josh Allen of the Buffalo Bills. I just don't think you can go wrong. Last year, he was the quarterback one with 23 points per game, and he is bust proof. There are no signs of him slowing down. The only wild card here would be the fact that he lost Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis, and maybe some of the new weapons he has to throw to take a while to get going. But overall, I think the rushing volume that makes him so valuable will be maintained. He is averaging 600 rushing yards per season, along with 9 rushing touchdowns per year. Last season, he scored 15 rushing touchdowns. So he's great. He also averages over 4,300 passing yards per game, 34 touchdowns, 14 interceptions over the last 4 seasons. And he's just so durable. He's only missed 1 game total in the last 5 years. You can't go wrong with Josh Allen. I still got to rank him at number one. At number two, though, I'm going with Jalen Hurts of the Philadelphia Eagles, who last year was quarterback 2 as well, with 21.5 points per game. He has missed 4 games over the last 3 years, so injury risk is not as safe as it is with Josh Allen. And his numbers did take a dip last year without Shane Steichen at offensive coordinator. But they get Kellen Moore this year, who should be just fine. I think he is an upgrade over Brian Johnson, their coordinator last year. And Jalen Hurts is also elite with his legs as well. He's averaged 682 rushing yards and 14 rushing touchdowns per year over the last 2. His passing stats are not as good, an average of 3,780 yards and 22.5 touchdowns per season. Only 10.5 interceptions, though. He's still great. You can't really go wrong. He was quarterback 2 on a per game basis with 21.5 points per game. And the only variable here is that maybe he doesn't score as many rushing touchdowns because they lost Hall of Fame center Jason Kelce and also replaced DeAndre Swift with an upgrade Saquon Barkley at running back this season. So they may have paid Barkley in order to run it a lot more on the goal line, kind of take a little bit off of Jalen Hurts' plate. But I still think overall you're still going to get at least 10 rushing touchdowns from him. I don't think that's just going to disappear from his game all of a sudden. So you still cannot go wrong, especially if you're stacking him with either A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith. Just a great pick overall in the round 4 on underdog. He is bust proof. But at QB3, I have Patrick Mahomes of the Kansas City Chiefs, who I know had a down season last year in 2023. He was only quarterback 12 in points per game with 17.6, but he gets a major upgrade in terms of wide receiver depth this season. Rashee Rice might not get suspended. Kadarius Toney is replaced with Hollywood Brown, who is injured at the moment, but is probably still fine the majority of the year. And MVS was replaced with the fastest player the NFL has ever seen, rookie wide receiver Xavier Worthy. Should be better than MVS as well. So that's going to be a big boost to his numbers. The fact that Travis Kelce is still as dominant as ever, even at the age of 35, is why you should trust him so much. And if you're still not convinced, Andy Reid is his head coach, and he's going to have a lot of fun getting this offense back to elite. Last year was a bit of a disappointment. So I still trust Mahomes. I know he doesn't have Tyreek Hill anymore, but 2 years ago, in the same situation without Tyreek, he was the MVP, throwing for over 5,200 yards, 41 touchdowns, and 12 interceptions. He also added 358 rushing yards and 4 rushing touchdowns. Odds are he gets back and closer to those stats much sooner rather than later. I'm not going to let last year scare me away. It wouldn't shock me at all if Mahomes was the quarterback 1 overall once again. And although he doesn't have as much rushing upside as the other 4 quarterbacks in my top 5, he can far surpass all of them in passing stats alone. So that's why I'm still betting on him. The injury risk is extremely minimal. He's missed only 4 games in 6 years, and 2 of those games were in week 18. He's almost always on the field. Mahomes is still an elite fantasy quarterback. So draft him. Don't be worried about it. I don't think anyone's going to regret Mahomes in the 5th round. But at number 4 is where I'm on a bit of a limb here. I have Anthony Richardson of the Colts as my quarterback number 4 this season, who is a true wild card because he only played in 4 games last year. He averaged 17.7 points per game, but he didn't finish 2 of those matchups due to a concussion and a shoulder injury that kept him out the remainder of the season. In the 2 games that he did finish, however, he averaged 24.3 points per game, and that's why he has the upside to be the QB1 overall this year. I personally love Shane Steichen. He almost took Gardner Minshew to the playoffs last year. He had Jalen Hurts a field goal away from winning a Super Bowl 2 years ago. And if we go back to the rookie season of Justin Herbert, he set all of the rookie records back when those two were together. So Richardson gets a elite play caller, and that's why I trust the Colts this year. I have them as a 7th seed wildcard team in the AFC, and as long as he stays healthy, I think there is no way he does not pay off his ADP as quarterback 5. The Colts add A.D. Mitchell, a really good receiver who I think fell in the draft. Jonathan Taylor is also healthy this year, and although Josh Downs got hurt, I think he's not an integral piece for Anthony Richardson's fantasy value. If anything, he might just run it even more, and that's going to lead to a ton of fantasy production. Last year, if we look at Richardson's strict rushing stats, only the numbers he put up with his legs, in the 4 games he played, even including the injuries, he averaged 9.4 fantasy points per game strictly on the ground. That is the upside we are chasing in fantasy football. So the only big variable here is the fact that we didn't see him play with Jonathan Taylor healthy at all this year. That is going to change, and maybe the 10 rush attempts per game does come down slightly. But even if it does, I don't think it's going to be by much. I think Richardson could lead the NFL in rushing yards among quarterbacks. So that's why the sky is the limit here. I think there's league winning potential, especially with Josh Allen losing weapons, Hurts maybe losing rushing touchdowns, Lamar being a bit volatile and adding Derrick Henry. He might take a dip in rushing stats himself. And the fact that Mahomes was a big letdown last season in fantasy, if all of those factors do happen this year, then I think the only risk for Richardson would be injury, and he could definitely finish as the QB1. I wouldn't be shocked at all. So I am planting my flag. I want Richardson next season. I think he's the best quarterback to target in the top 5. I think you're going to be very happy if he's your guy. But at number 5, I have Lamar Jackson as the last player in this elite tier. And last season, he won his 2nd MVP with the Ravens, but he only put up 3,678 passing yards, 24 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. In the passing game, you're not getting elite numbers from Lamar, but he was the highest rushing quarterback in the NFL last year with 821 rushing yards. He only added 5 rushing touchdowns, however, in 16 games, and that's not quite an elite aspect of his game. If you look at the last 5 seasons, Lamar is only averaging 4.8 rushing touchdowns per year, so 5 feels destined to repeat. If it's more than 7, it would be a career season in that stat. So that's why I only have him here at number 5. He was quarterback 3 in points per game last season with 21.1, but I do kind of feel like maybe his stats are going to keep coming down in the rushing department as he gets older. His 5-year average would be 65 rushing yards per game, but last year as an MVP, he only put up 51.3 rushing yards per game. So it has been coming down. He's also missed 15 games over the last 5 seasons, and there are a few red flags starting to crop up when you consider that fact. But they did add Derrick Henry. Maybe they don't lean on him as much in the run game, especially in the red zone. They probably hand it off to Derrick Henry a little bit more, but he's still going to be very productive. I'm not worried about it. He's just a little bit more inconsistent. Some weeks he gives you 40 fantasy points. Other weeks he gives you 12 because they just don't need him in order to win. They're not desperate for him to go off every single week. So that's why I have him below Anthony Richardson, but I still trust him as a very good fantasy quarterback. Mark Andrews is healthy this year. Zay Flowers should be even better in year 2. And it looks like Isaiah Likely in year 3 could step up as well in the passing game. But I'm not really concerned about his passing numbers over the last 5 years. He only averages 210 passing yards per game. If that does come up, it's not going to be 300 yards per game all of a sudden. So I'm really just dependent on the rushing stats for this ranking, and I think it pays off, but it wouldn't shock anyone if he does get hurt again this season. At quarterback 5, though, I think that's his floor. I wouldn't rank him any lower than QB5. But moving on to tier 2, I have CJ Stroud of the Houston Texans as my quarterback 6. And maybe you're one of those people that think the hype on him has gotten out of hand. It might not be justified to be drafting him this high, but at the very least, you should be more excited about him this season with Stephon Diggs being added to the team. If anything, that's definitely going to improve his passing numbers. And last year, he had a record-breaking rookie season where Tank Dell got injured and Nico Collins also missed time as well. Stroud threw for over 4,100 yards, 23 passing touchdowns, and 5 interceptions in only 15 games. He added 167 rushing yards and 3 rushing touchdowns last year. You're not expecting him to run the ball, but if he ever does, you're excited, and that's a nice boost when it does happen. But he's still quarterback 6 on Underdog, despite his ADP moving down about a full round to 71st overall at the 6-7 turn. The last month or so, people have been souring on him a little bit. He used to go in round 5. But I think it's because people are not really looking too deep into his numbers when you consider the fact that last year he was quarterback 9 in points per game with 18.7. You can be like, quarterback 6 is too high. I don't think that pays off. But I think if you cherry pick a little bit and remove the Jets game in week 14, you will be convinced he is worth it. And I don't think it's unreasonable to take that game out because Tank Dell and Dalton Schultz both missed that game with injury. It was raining. Nico Collins only played 3 snaps. He got hurt very early in that matchup. And Stroud also had a concussion late in the game. He did not finish it himself. So I would throw it out completely. His numbers were terrible in that game. And if you take it out, his average in the other 14 full healthy games jumps to 19.8 points per game, which last year was tied with Dak Prescott for quarterback 4 on a per game basis. So if we are right to assume he's going to be better with Stephon Diggs on the team, then 20 points per game is a reasonable projection. And that would mean quarterback 6 is actually too low of a ranking. But because he does not have that elite rushing upside, that is why I just can't rank him in the same tier as the top 5. And that's why I would still prefer guys like Richardson or Lamar Jackson going above him. But it's really hard to mess up when you draft CJ Stroud. He should stay healthy. And as long as that happens, I don't think there's any scenario where you're going to be disappointed drafting him as an elite option. He could finish top 3. I wouldn't be shocked if that happened. Quarterback 7 for me, though, is Joe Burrow of the Cincinnati Bengals, who last year did have an injury-plagued season, and injuries have become a slight pattern over his 4-year career. But to bet against him just feels like a dumb call. I have the Bengals this year for 12 wins, and now we are running out of rushing quarterbacks in the rankings. He's definitely a tier below the top 5, but I'm not reading into last year's down stats at all. He only played 10 games, missed the preseason with a calf injury. He didn't get healthy until after week 5, and even then, I don't think he was 100%. Jamar Chase and T. Higgins also dealt with injuries themselves, and all in all, he was quarterback 21 in points per game with only 14.9, but I think you should just throw that out and look to the year prior where in 2022, he played 16 games and he averaged 21.9 points per game, which last year would have ranked above Jalen Hurts and have been quarterback 2 on a per game basis in 2023. So I am cherry picking a little bit, but overall, I think he will be bouncing back. And I know last year was just so bad. A lot of people kind of forget about how good he is, but I just don't think the wrist injury is going to be a big factor. I think as long as it's irrelevant this season, then you're getting a massive value with an ADP of quarterback 8, pick 90 overall. The only way he doesn't pay off is if he gets hurt, and that risk I think is baked into the ADP already. Don't be shy, just draft Joe Burrow. I think you'll be thankful for it later. He's going to be an elite option most of the time. The only reason I have him behind CJ Stroud is because the injury concerns are still kind of looming in the back of my mind. When it comes to Stroud, they are non-existent, and that is the tiebreaker, but I see the two as equally as valuable. You're getting great quarterbacks no matter what with both of them. At quarterback 8, though, I have a player in the same tier who also has some injury concerns. It's Kyler Murray of the Arizona Cardinals, who is listed at 5'10", 207, but that kind of feels a little generous. 2 years ago, he tore his ACL late in 2022, and he missed 9 games last year while recovering from it. He is still very mobile, though. Even after the ACL injury, that aspect of his game was still there. He averaged 31 rushing yards per game and 3 rushing touchdowns in his 8 full games last season. Despite only averaging 225 passing yards per game with 10 touchdowns and 5 interceptions, he was still the quarterback 11 in points per game with 18. Thanks to those rushing numbers, that is what you are hoping for when you draft Kyler Murray. That is the ceiling you are leaning into. He put up those numbers in a new offense with a new coach and offensive coordinator, also without a training camp and with no real wide receiver one. Marquise Brown was very injured late last season. So this year, I think he's going to be much better in the passing game because they drafted rookie wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr. with the 4th overall pick. And he's going to play alongside breakout tight end Trey McBride, who looks like a stud at the position. So it's safe to assume he will be even better for fantasy this year. And we've also seen him put up top 5 numbers at quarterback for fantasy in the past. With a terrible defense, I still think he's going to need to light up the scoreboard in order for Arizona to be competitive. So you're getting a lot of upside when you draft Kyler Murray. I think if you wanted to rank him as high as QB6 above Stroud, I wouldn't think you're crazy. But because he's also missed 18 games in the last 3 seasons, I am personally not willing to do it. That's why I'm 1 spot lower on him than his underdog ADP of quarterback 7, pick 76 overall. He's still a very good pick. I just think the value on Burrow about 15 picks later is even better, as well as my quarterback 9, who I view in the same tier, who's going even later. At number 9, I have Dak Prescott of the Dallas Cowboys, who I kind of feel like I'm disrespecting by ranking him this low. He's also quarterback 9 off the board on Underdog with an ADP of 94th overall, and I think that's a steal if you get him. The other day, I got him at pick 108, and I was ecstatic at the 9-10 turn. So this feels like a massive value considering he was quarterback 4 on a per game basis last season with 19.8 points per game. He nearly won the MVP, and it also took a while for the Cowboys offense to get rolling in the first year with Mike McCarthy as the play caller. But in the final 11 games of the season, when Dak was on fire after the week 7 bye, he was elite. He averaged 289 passing yards per game, threw for 30 touchdowns and only 5 interceptions. He also added 14 rushing yards per game and also scored 1 rushing touchdown. And all of that together was an average of 23.5 points per game, which would have ranked above Josh Allen for quarterback 1 on a per game basis. You have a potential league winner in Dak Prescott if you draft him as quarterback 9. So I am probably way too low ranking him here because not much has changed in this offense. Yes, Ezekiel Elliott is replacing Tony Pollard. There's also a replacement on the offensive line. Hall of Famer Tyron Smith is now being replaced with rookie Jalen Guyton. And Michael Gallup also retired, but he was kind of irrelevant in the target share already. I don't think it moves the needle. So maybe there's some risk. It's possible the offense is not as good, but I think the only way it doesn't work out is if CeeDee Lamb misses some time due to either his holdout contract negotiation or he gets injured. That would be really brutal. If CeeDee Lamb gets hurt, the Cowboys offense will look like shit. So that's why I think there is a slight red flag. And if you are concerned, it's not like completely impossible that he doesn't pay off, but more likely than not, he's going to be a very safe bet all season long. And he's also in a contract season. I think he's going to play his ass off trying to get the biggest contract we've ever seen of any NFL player in history. So I think it's safe to bet that Lamb's contract does get figured out and he does start by week 1. And if that happens, there's a genuinely legitimate scenario where Dak puts up top 3 fantasy numbers this season. And if you draft him at 9th overall at the position, you have a league winner on your hands. So I'm probably ranking him too low, but I think with all the injuries at quarterback last year and some youth with other players like CJ Stroud and Anthony Richardson, I think there's a lot of reason to be hyped on other guys I have ranked higher, but I do have him in the same tier as CJ Stroud, and I could put him at number 6, and I would make a very good argument why I would do so. So he's a great pick. I think if you draft CeeDee Lamb or Jake Ferguson, try to stack him. It feels like a no-brainer, and you're getting such a safe guy in round 9. You really can't go wrong when drafting Dak Prescott. But moving on to the following tier, tier 3 at quarterback, I have Jordan Love at number 10. And this tier, I think, all has the opportunity to finish top 5 at the position as well. But because of their youth and lack of true experience, there are still some concerns. And even though Jordan Love is not a rookie, we only have like half a season last year of like proven track record where he was actually playing at an elite level. Last year, he was the quarterback 8 in points per game with 18.9, but it was really a tale of 2 seasons. He was terrible in the first 9 games. The Packers went 3-6. He only beat the Bears, the Saints, and the Rams without Matthew Stafford. He was only averaging 16.3 points per game. He was putting up 223 passing yards per game, 14 touchdowns, and he also threw 10 interceptions. That was not good. He didn't add much on the ground, but he did add 2 rushing touchdowns as well. If you look at week 11 on, however, something clicked. The Packers went 6-2. They also beat the Cowboys in the playoffs, a complete rout in the wild card round. They also were very close to beating the Niners in the divisional round. So that's why he got paid a massive contract. He's now tied for highest paid in the entire NFL at $55 million per year. He's tied with Joe Burrow and Trevor Lawrence, and the Packers might have another generational quarterback on their hands for over a decade. But if we look at those last 8 regular season games, this is where I'm super hyped on Jordan Love for fantasy. He was throwing for 269 passing yards per game. He also threw for 18 touchdowns and only threw 1 interception. He was extremely clean in that statistic. He also added 2 rushing touchdowns as well, and his fantasy points jumped to 21.8 points per game on a per game basis last year. That would have ranked as quarterback 2 above Jalen Hurts. So it is a slightly small sample size. Only 8 games is not the biggest you would like to see, but there's a ton of upside here. Jordan Love could be a top 5 quarterback, and it wouldn't shock me at all. I think if you draft him, you're getting a great pick, and I think quarterback 10 really represents his floor. But I am a little concerned that his touchdown numbers do come down a little bit because the Packers did upgrade their running back core. They added Josh Jacobs and Marshawn Lloyd. They got a lot younger at the position, getting rid of Aaron Jones. And last year, that was a big reason why Love was so good in the red zone. The Packers only combined for a total 5 rushing touchdowns between their running backs, Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. So that is why I think that number will be increasing this season. The new running backs will be scoring more, and that probably eats into Love's touchdown stats overall. But I still think you're getting a great option. There's a chance that Love is even better than last year with more experience in the NFL. He should take a leap. He also has arguably the best wide receiver core in the NFL. At the very least, it's without a doubt the deepest at the position. Even Bo Melton, their 5th guy, is legit. And that's why I think Jordan Love is a bust-proof pick. His ADP is quarterback 10, pick 96 overall on Underdog. And if you get him in the 9th round, like, there is no risk at that price. Go ahead and draft him. I think he's a smash pick, especially if you're stacking him with any of his receivers. He is phenomenal. But similar to Jordan Love, a player with very minimal experience in the NFL is rookie Jayden Daniels of the Washington Commanders. And at number 11, I think this ranking is more emblematic of just how deep the position is, not my concerns that Jayden Daniels is not worthy of a starting quarterback ranking next season. He is the legitimate last quarterback with elite rushing upside. The last season at LSU, when he won the Heisman, he ran for 1,133 rushing yards with 10 rushing touchdowns. He also scored 11 rushing touchdowns the year prior. And the last 3 straight seasons, he's added at least 710 rushing yards on the ground. He also threw for over 3,800 yards, 40 touchdowns, and only 4 interceptions in just 12 games last season. If he does that in the NFL this year, you have a league winner on your hands. So quarterback 11 kind of feels like his floor. I think he could absolutely finish as a top 5 guy. I kind of want to rank him above Kyler Murray, honestly, but I think everybody knows there's a ton of hype here. He's already being drafted above Caleb Williams, one of the most hyped rookies we've ever seen in the NFL. So if they added Brandon Ayuk, I think he would be playing with an elite receiving core. They didn't, and that's not going to happen. So it's just average. While Terry McLaurin is destined for another 1,000-yard season this year, Jahan Dotson was a massive disappointment last season, and it's very unproven what we're going to get from rookie Luke McCaffrey, Zach Ertz, Ben Sinnott, as well as Austin Eckler. I don't think they're like major upgrades over guys like Curtis Samuel, Logan Thomas, and Antonio Gibson, who left this offense last year. But the Commanders do get a big upgrade at offensive coordinator with Cliff Kingsbury, who is going to turn this offense into a fast-paced team. They could definitely lead the league in pace of play, like Kingsbury has done in the past in Arizona. Jayden Daniels already looked great in his first preseason start. I think there's no real reason to doubt his potential. I am just concerned that he could not stay healthy. His frame is a little slender. He's fast. He runs a 4.5 40. But at 6 foot 4 inches tall, he is 210 pounds. And when you watch his tape in college, there are some ragdoll type of tackles. Sometimes he looks like he's getting slammed to the ground, and kind of shocking that he gets up. I'm a little bit worried about his durability long term. But as a rookie, he'll probably bounce back. I think those hits will add up over time. But I'm a little worried this could turn into an RG3 situation long term, but even Robert Griffin III led Washington to a playoff berth as a rookie. So Jayden Daniels, I think, has a ton of potential. I think he could be a top 5 quarterback this season. And if that does happen, if he does run for 1,000+ rushing yards, he is probably the league winner at quarterback that you need in order to win a championship, given where he's being drafted as quarterback 11, pick 101 overall. Feels like a steal. So if he does turn into Lamar Jackson, you want him on your team. I think if you have him as your backup, you're going to be ecstatic, and you might end up trading away who you drafted to be your quarterback 1 because Jayden Daniels is just so fucking good for fantasy. So I might be really too low with his QB 11 ranking, but I think it factors in not just the upside, but also the injury risk as well. He might not finish his rookie season, and that's the only reason I can't rank him as a top 10 quarterback. But if he puts up top 6 numbers, I wouldn't be shocked at all. I want to target Jayden Daniels wherever I can. The upside is too high to ignore. But at QB 12, I have Caleb Williams of the Chicago Bears, who is also another stud rookie quarterback who looked phenomenal in his preseason debut. I don't want to read too much into the preseason, but there's just so much hype around Caleb Williams. He feels destined to pay off, and even if he doesn't live up to all of that hype right away, I don't think he needs to be Patrick Mahomes immediately in order to have a successful rookie season and offer a lot of value in fantasy. Chicago has still never had a quarterback throw for over 4,000 yards or 30+ touchdowns. I think there is a chance that Caleb Williams could beat both of those records this season. And as long as his elite trio of wide receivers stays healthy, it feels destined to happen. They have DJ Moore already. They signed him to a 4-year extension just a week or two ago. They also traded for Keenan Allen, who was amazing last year. And they also drafted Rome Odunze, who's a stud with the 9th overall pick. They locked up a ton of production at receiver for quite some time. They also have a great young tight end in Cole Kmet. They added legit depth behind him in Gerald Everett as well. And if Caleb cannot figure it out, I am definitely not going to blame him. I'm going to blame the coaching. His upside is top 5 at the position. So I think he will live up to expectation at some point. Maybe not this year, but I think by the time we're in year 3, you're going to be talking about him as a potential top 5 quarterback, if not top 3. So I really do believe in him. I think the Heisman winner 2 years ago has a ton of upside, ton of potential. He threw for 4,500+ yards 2 years ago when he won the Heisman, along with 42 touchdowns and 5 interceptions in 14 games. And if he stays healthy, I think we are drafting him at his floor. He is going off the board as quarterback 13, pick 112 overall. Last year, his stats did come down, but I'm not really reading into it. I don't really care. I also think he's an underrated runner of the football. As a rookie, he put up 442 rushing yards and 6 touchdowns. And the last 2 years, he's added 21 rushing touchdowns in 26 games. So don't be surprised if he gives you 6+ rushing touchdowns in his rookie season. If that happens, we are definitely looking at a top 10 quarterback in fantasy. So I'm really optimistic. I think at worst, you're getting him at his floor at QB 13. And I think there is legitimate top 8, top 7 potential if the rushing stats start to hit as well. So I kind of feel too low with this ranking, but the fact that we haven't seen it happen before is the big concern. It's possible that the Bears offense still kind of struggles as it has in the past, but I think next year we might be drafting him top 3. It is possible that that does happen. He could absolutely look like Patrick Mahomes, given the firepower that he has to throw to. The talent at wide receiver is just too good not to work out. So I definitely trust him, especially if I'm stacking him. I think he's a great pick going in round 10. I think he's bust proof. I think there's no way he finishes lower than quarterback 15, barring an injury. And I just don't think that's going to happen. I think it's unlikely for him to get hurt as a rookie, but it is possible. You never know. We'll see what happens, but you're probably getting a steal given how late in the draft he is being taken. At QB 13, though, we enter the final tier of this video where you're probably going to be safe drafting them as your backup in a typical 12-team league. I mean, there's only 12 you can start. This would literally be the ranking that would be the first backup overall. But I think Purdy is a little bit less safe given the Brandon Ayuk situation. He has a very high floor. I think you're getting 250 yards, 2 touchdowns every single week, no matter what. That's what Jimmy Garoppolo was doing in this offense. And Purdy is a lot more talented. He also offers the potential to put up over 300 yards passing and 3+ touchdowns any given week. In the Kyle Shanahan 49ers offense, it's not a bad bet to make in fantasy. So that's why I trust him. He is going off the board in the 10th round on Underdog as quarterback 12, pick 111. And that also feels bust proof. But the reason I have him behind Brock Purdy is because Ayuk still is possibly going to get traded. It's possible that he stays in San Francisco. At this point, it's kind of like 50-50 in my opinion. It can go either way. But even if Ayuk is gone, I still think you're getting pretty good production out of Juwan Jennings and the rookie wide receiver Ricky Pearsall. You're also going to get more targets and volume for Deebo Samuel and George Kittle. And betting on Kyle Shanahan, they're probably still going to put up the same amount of points overall. The Niners will probably average 30+ points on offense every single week. And although he does have the best running back in the NFL, Christian McCaffrey also catches a ton of passes. And overall, I think that does add to Purdy's value rather than take away from it. Sometimes McCaffrey scores 3 rushing touchdowns and you don't get more than like 10 points from Purdy, but more times than not, you get 3 touchdowns from Purdy and very good numbers for fantasy. Last year, he was actually the quarterback 6 overall, but if you look at his points per game, he was just the quarterback 10. He finished number 6 because 4 guys above him did get injured at the position, and that did help him a lot for fantasy. But I still think you're getting a very safe pick no matter what. Even if Ayuk gets traded, I'm not going to bring him down in the rankings. I'm going to keep him here at 13, maybe number 14, but I think 13 is more likely where I'm going to settle. If Ayuk stays in San Francisco, however, I probably bump him up to possibly 11 or 12. He would be in the next tier above this if Ayuk is indeed a San Francisco 49er next year. But until we know that for sure, there is a little bit of risk regarding Brock Purdy, and that's why I just can't rank him in the same tier above with guys like Love, Daniels, and Caleb. I think you're not getting as high of a ceiling if Ayuk is not with the Niners. But there's still plenty of time before week 1. We'll see what happens. We'll see if this ranking changes as we approach September. My quarterback 14, though, is probably the safest player you can draft at the quarterback position. If he's your backup, you are in excellent shape. You can probably still compete at a high level, even if he's your quarterback 1, because you know for a fact you're getting a 20+ points per game quarterback when he plays at home. Last year, that's exactly what he did. In his 8 home games, he averaged 20.9 points per game. That would have ranked top 4 at the position in points per game. So you get a stud when the Lions play at home, they light up the scoreboard, and Jared Goff is always a top 10 quarterback when that happens. But he is not the same player on the road. If you look at his 9 road games last season, he only averaged 14 points per game. And that's why on the year, you didn't want him in your lineup every single week. It was truly matchup dependent. But when he's playing at home, you can definitely trust him. But it's more so emblematic of his splits on the road when he's playing outdoors and indoors that make him a player you want to bench. In 5 outdoor games last year on the road, he averaged only 12.7 points per game. But in 4 indoor road games, he averaged 15.6 points per game. So basically, if you draft Goff, start him every time he plays in Detroit. If he plays on the road, indoors, you're getting a much more average quarterback. You may start him depending on who else you have. And if he plays on the road outdoors, you might as well bench him. You're not even going to get 13 points in your lineup. So it's very easy to know when to start him, when to bench him. And this year, his stats might go up. I know he lost Josh Reynolds as part of this offense, but those 64 targets are just going to go to other players that are definitely more athletic and better overall than Josh Reynolds. And I think that's going to increase his numbers. If it affects him, I think it means he's going up in value, not going down. So that's why I think he is a bust-proof pick. His ADP is quarterback 16, pick 125 overall. And in round 11, you cannot go wrong, especially if you're stacking him with Amon-Ra St. Brown or Sam Laporta. Draft Jared Goff. You will never regret it. He's going to give you 8 games this year with at least 20 points per game. That is guaranteed. At QB 15, though, I have my boy Justin Herbert of the LA Chargers. I am a Chargers fan, so maybe I'm a little bit higher on him than you are. The fact that Herbert is currently in a walking boot dealing with plantar fasciitis does not help my case for ranking him above ADP. He comes off the board as quarterback 17, pick 140 overall, though, and that just feels too fucking cheap for a guy like Herbert. He's too talented. I understand he lost his top 4 weapons in Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Austin Eckler, and Gerald Everett, but Herbert has been fantastic throughout his career from a fantasy perspective. Last year, he was quarterback 7 in points per game last year with 19.2 in his 12 full games. And despite less volume this season, he's going to be more efficient from a pass attempt standpoint. His offensive line is much improved. If they can stay healthy, then Herbert will have a lot more time in the pocket. And I genuinely think his weapons are underrated. McConkey is a reliable, consistent, athletic route running specialist running in the slot. As a rookie, I think he will be a top 30 fantasy weapon. And Josh Palmer has been an underrated, solid wide receiver who has stepped in whenever called upon over the last 2 years. He's been decent. Quentin Johnston sucks, but DJ Chark can get open deep down the field, and there's always some game-breaking ability when Herbert is throwing the ball. There's also some serviceable tight ends on the roster as well. From a talent perspective, I think Herbert is at worst quarterback 8 in the NFL from an NFL standpoint, not just fantasy, but true NFL passers. I've never seen anyone rank him past quarterback 10 when listing the best quarterbacks in the league, and he can make any throw you ask him to. He's elite down the field, and while maybe he's not going to run it as much with his foot injury this year, he can also give you 75 plus rushing yards if he needs to. That is part of his game. So in my opinion, he's just too talented for me to rank him any lower than 15. It kind of feels disrespectful, but I understand if you still think I'm too high. But I'm just going to bet on Jim Harbaugh and this offense working out. After all, Harbaugh revitalized Alex Smith's career in San Francisco, and he looked like a bust before Harbaugh got there. So I'm just willing to trust that it all works out in the end and bet on Herbert's talent. He might not be the most consistent fantasy quarterback this season, but number 17 is just too low for me to put him, and I got to rank my guy higher than that. Given how cheap he is going at pick 140 overall, it's possible he's a top 12 quarterback and could be a league winner if you draft him that late. I love taking Justin Herbert as my backup. But at quarterback 16, the last player in this video would be Trevor Lawrence of the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I think he's the last player you are like really excited about if you punt the position and draft him as your week 1 starter. Lawrence did have a weird season last year. All of his stats were down despite adding Calvin Ridley. And even though he got hurt in week 12, he actually scored more fantasy points per game in the final 4 games of the year when he was injured. His first 11 games, he was not as good for fantasy. But I think the reason why is because Travis Etienne was on a heater to start the season, and he stole a lot of the touchdowns. That was really eating into the upside for Lawrence in fantasy. So that's why he finished as quarterback 15 on a per game basis with an average of 17.2 points per game. And I think that's kind of where he's going to finish again this year. It's possible that he puts up top 10 numbers any week. It's also possible he's not top 20 if Etienne scores multiple touchdowns once again. So that's where he's just a more boom bust option. But I also think he doesn't get enough credit for his mobility. He's not an elite rusher, don't get me wrong, but he did add 339 rushing yards last season and 4 rushing touchdowns in 16 games. That's 21 rushing yards per game, and that's only 3 fewer than Mahomes on a per game basis. Mahomes gives you 24, Lawrence gives you 21. So Mahomes gets credit. I think Lawrence deserves some as well. And Doug Peterson also calls a lot of quarterback sneaks. When they're on the 1 or 2 yard line, Lawrence is tall enough to punch it in himself. And that is a pretty consistent part of his game. He scored 9 rushing touchdowns over the last 2 seasons. So when that happens, it's a very nice boost to his fantasy value. When it doesn't, it's not like terrible, but you need the touchdowns to hit in order to get good usage. So that's why I'm a little concerned when Etienne plays like the stud he is. You're not going to get great numbers from Lawrence, but I really love the Brian Thomas addition. I think he's a very good wide receiver drafted in the first round this season. Long term, I think he's really going to pay off. But at quarterback 14 on Underdog, his ADP is pick 119 overall. I think he's a fine selection. I definitely take him if I have stacking options available with the Jags, but I'd rather bet on Jared Goff going 6 picks later, or even Justin Herbert going almost 20 picks later. So that's why I don't take him like crazy, but I still think he's a very competitive guy. I think if he's your backup, you are in great shape. If he's your QB1, I usually want like 3 total at the position. I don't feel like super safe if I only have 1 backup behind him and he's my starter. So that's how I feel. Those are my top 16 quarterback rankings. Here on the screen is a breakdown of the tiers for this video. I have Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, Anthony Richardson, and Lamar Jackson in the top 5. In tier 2, I got CJ Stroud, Joe Burrow, Kyler Murray, and Dak Prescott. In tier 3, I have Jordan Love, Jayden Daniels, and Caleb Williams. And in the 4th tier, the best backups you can find, I have Brock Purdy, Jared Goff, Justin Herbert, and Trevor Lawrence. But I will be ranking every quarterback in the NFL. Look out for part 2 of this video coming out later this week. And if you enjoyed the video, hit the like button for me, subscribe to the channel for more content like this, and look out for my live stream drafts and future videos. Ring the notification bell if you don't want to miss out on all my new content. But that's it for me in this video. I hope to see you next time. My name is Adam Riancho, and thank you for watching. Nice and blunt.